Good morning, Jorge.
Good morning, Michael.
It's nearly the 100-day mark of the presidency of Donald Trump. We have chosen to discuss those 100 days. My first thought on the matter is, have we ever, in my lifetime, which is considerably longer than yours, have we ever had a president who has made us want him to fail, who has made us hope that he will fail? No, the answer is no, not until Donald Trump. I cheer inside myself every time he fails. And now I'm cheering outside of myself. I have no compunction whatsoever in telling the world that I hope he fails, that I want him to fail, that I expect him to fail, and that he deserves to fail. Because, as Barack Obama said quite a few times during the campaign, this man was uniquely unqualified to be president, and since he became president, he has proved the wisdom of Obama's words.
I think you're not alone in wanting him to fail. There's a lot of people that are in that boat. I can include myself in it. I'm scared of saying that because you never know what the collateral damage is when he fails. If that is a thing that sometimes, if it would just be ineffective, would be better than him full out failing. If that, I mean, if he would have just sat there and done very little, it would be better than some of the things he has tried to do. I think the ineffectiveness has been very surprising. I was listening to a show in which they were discussing having an argument with a Trump supporter about the first 100 days. And the person bring out this key thing of the Republicans, who Trump was nominated for and is the leader of. They have the House, they have the Senate, he is president, yet somehow they have managed to not get things done. So there's this weird place of just like, well, is it, how did he win? Like, how did that come about? And I think like him not being popular, I thought once he was in office, the Republicans were just gonna do what they do and get some wars going or something. But they have been very ineffective.
The reason why, notwithstanding the fact that they control the Congress and the White House, the reason why they haven't gotten anything done is because what he is trying to do is basically wrong. The Muslim ban, shot down by the courts. The repeal and replace Obamacare, which would have deprived some 20 to 25 million Americans of their health insurance, basically wrong, which the Republican Congress realized and looking forward to the 2018 elections understood to be possibly their death knell vis-a-vis their political careers if they passed such a bill. That is why nothing has gotten done. The man is erratic. We know he's vulgar. But what amazes me the most is that you mentioned his supporters. They continue to refuse to see that he is a repulsive human being to begin with. They should have seen that during the campaign, which should have disqualified him from the White House. And now they're refusing to see that he is incompetent and that he is ignorant. Completely refusing. Their answer, their standard stock response, well, give him a chance. It's early days yet. We have no choice. He's going to be in there for some few 100 days more until he is impeached, which I firmly believe he will be once the Russia investigation begins to reveal what was behind the collusion during the campaign. But he will be there for a few more 100 days. He could cause a lot of damage. I wonder if any of his supporters will by then have begun to see the reality.
Well, when you said there, which is an argument that they do have, which is it's early days. But the reason why the whole 100 days, the first 100 days are analyzed and talked about so much is because they say the first 100 days of a new president are his most effective ones, which makes this presidency look like, oh, what are we gonna do if this was his most effective? Because the whole idea is once someone is president, their popularity is at a high. What they can do executive orders without getting too much of a political repercussion. Let's say the government is. They all want to show that they're doing something. So if they were just everyone in Congress, every senator, everyone wants to show action. So that's an interesting defense to have when you go, well, you analyze the first 100 because that's when you can get things done. You can, you haven't had to pass a budget yet. You haven't had to, a lot of things that usually, especially a budget in the U.S. where how much money spent and the deficit is something that the population really looks at, they'll come into some trouble sooner than later.
All I have seen during this 100 days of his is not the fulfillment of his promises to his base, but the exact opposite. What he has established is not the so-called populist agenda that he conned the people into believing he would implement. I rather see an implementation of a plutocracy. This is a government of the wealthy, by the wealthy, and for the wealthy. Look at his tax reform suggestions and policy proposals. The man has staffed his cabinet and his advisory ranks with people from Goldman Sachs and Wall Street. He has completely reversed himself vis-a-vis the kind of pro-proletarian agenda that he put forth during the campaign, which only goes to further reinforce the obvious fact that the man is a liar. The man is a pathological liar. Which brings me back to his base and the 35% firm support that he has, and the wonder and the fear that grows in me about the possibility of these people forming such a power block in the United States, such that we're going to have to live with for generations to come.
That's a true fear, especially because the two-party political system doesn't allow for that block to be there without having too much power, kind of like you would have in Europe, where many parliamentary democracies have that. You can have a block of far right, far left, but then they don't affect the government as much. Here, I think we're noticing that sometimes that small group can tip the scale all the way, because in the U.S. it's either one side or the other. But to switch it around, or to turn it in going back to analyzing the first 100 days, I wanted to ask you, as a writer and someone who has, I guess, studied language or been aware, what would you say your analysis of the first 100 days of the language that he has used? Because there's a weird regression happening from how he used to talk in The Apprentice to his speeches now. What would your analysis be of his speeches now?
Well, for one thing, I have to confess, or perhaps rather to say that I'm proud to have never watched The Apprentice. So I don't know what kind of language he used there, but I'm sure that he was scripted and helped by professional writers on that program. Therefore, it has nothing to do with his
Which
own
he is here
abilities.
too. No president goes out and does a speech without a writer.
Formal set-piece speeches of a president are written by his staff, but when he gives a press conference, or all of those speeches that he gave at rallies during the campaign, were himself speaking mainly extemporaneously, and that showed the shallowness of his brain. It was like opening up the top of his head, looking in and seeing a fucking train wreck. That is the man's intellectual capacity, equivalent to a train wreck. So when you talk about the kind of language that he uses when he's confronted by a question, for example, in a press conference, I really fear for the level of not only public discourse, but private discourse in the United States and beyond, given the kind of example that he is setting. It is appalling, it is frightening, it is sickening, it is something to be despised. I can't even begin to find the language to describe how much contempt I have, not only for him, but for those who continue to support him.
But for me, the language part was an interesting part of it all, because it showed something that I thought him and the people that surround him would have changed, would have managed to be like, you know what, let's really only talk in speeches that we write and we can come up with, that way we can sell you better. And him as a businessman, I would have assumed that at some point he would notice this isn't going well, so then I'm going to, let's do this, because he could have. Let's be honest, there's racist people in the world. The situations in Europe have showed that if you're a well-spoken racist, you can get pretty far. Like the Muslim ban, they just needed, if they would have sold that and he would have come out with a speech that was a bit more eloquent, they would have, his first 100 days would be different. I truly believe if he wouldn't have Spicier, I don't know how you say his name. Like, he's not good. I have read some of the, like, just, if you ever want to have an aneurysm, read a speech by one of them too. And there's so many pauses before a sentence finishes. No full sentences are said. I mean, I get it that he got the election by being a 5th grade bully. Like, I get it, that makes sense. How do you make it not be a real discussion? Just get angry. It's true. If I just get angry at you and our discussion is just about, Michael, you are bad, doesn't matter what we say, because I'm just attacking you as a person. I don't care what you're thinking. So we're getting to that point.
Yes, we can judge him also by the quality of the language that he permits to go out in his name, and it indicates how erratic, how unprepared, how uncaring he is about these things, because it's well within his power to control every single word that goes out. But just check his Twitter feed, for example. His Twitter feed, 40 characters, 140 characters, excuse me. And almost every single one of them contains a syntactical or grammatical or spelling error. This is an indication of a person who just does not give a damn. He just wants to quickly and, in his mind, effectively address his base. But I want to shift this a little bit and ask you about your generation, Jorge, because I don't see the millennials protesting to the extent that they should be. What is your response? I know that if an individual like Donald Trump appeared when my generation, when the boomers were around 25 to 30 years of age, there would have been mass protests that would equal the kind of protests that we saw during the Vietnam War, protests about the ignorance and vulgarity and lack of qualifications of this man to be president.
So one thing, I think we need to take into account that the tools that are available for protesting, when your generation was 20, 30, there wasn't the same amount of avenues to protest. Today and age, you can protest on Twitter. It's a lesser effect, or it's not as big as going out in the streets. So that you have to analyze that. There's a lot of people that are making their voice heard. There's you can sign a pledge online. You can a petition on for the White House to actually have to answer things. So I think there's all this extra place that people are protesting, so we cannot take that into account. He is getting roasted online by millions of people all the time, right? So they are protesting him. I do wonder the part of a lot of people didn't go out to vote. So those people that didn't go out to vote won't go out to protest. And I wonder how many people are scared of the police now. Police has gotten very militarized, right? Like that's you have seen what happened to so many, like the protests. When you see some protests on the streets, they do turn violent often enough. I mean, if it's not a march, if it's a protest, and when we saw it with Wall Street, the what's it called?
The
The Occupy movement. That got violent, and the. So I don't know if for a lot of people the whole protesting thing, it has been made to look so bad on the internet, so bad by the media, so bad by, it's this activists. They're bad. They're like they don't have jobs. They don't do anything.
Okay, I think that I am well answered because yes, there is huge online activity vis-a-vis anti-Trump, the anti-Trump resistance. But if we're going to sum up on the 100 days, I would say that my dispirited reaction to the 100 days, my demoralization at the very fact that this man is in the White House, has been tempered a great deal by, for example, watching Stephen Colbert every night on The Late Show. His opening monologue every single night is anti-Trump. He ridicules him, he mocks him, he brings to the attention of his audience, which is growing.
First time ever, he has the highest
yes.
rating. Which is, I always find the media, I think people need to realize, if you look at what kind of, this is a bit, I'll use this as an example, what kind of villains or monsters you have in superhero movies represent what fear people have in society. And if you have a monster about a nuclear accident, was when everyone was scared of nuclear accidents. So here, I think that we're switching what kind of entertainment people want. People want to listen to Colbert because they want to hear him ridicule the president. They want to know like that something is happening because they want to feel like they're part of the action. And yeah, I agree with Colbert. Like, yeah, they're not doing anything. They're just at home talking to a TV.
It helps to counteract the demoralization, I have to say. We take tremendous pleasure from seeing this man skewered on a daily basis. And it happens on the other late shows as well. Jimmy Fallon on The Tonight Show does it as well.
In a very mild manner,
yeah.
per se. Like Jimmy Fallon has always been more nice, sweet guy.
Yes. But my final remark on the 100 days would concern the activity of Trump vis-a-vis a couple of his foreign visitors. Angela Merkel, leader of Germany, great ally, democratic country, visits, gets the cold shoulder. A dictator from Egypt visits, he cozies up to him. A would-be dictator in Turkey wins a referendum that would give him and probably will give him almost dictatorial and despotic control of Turkey. And what does Trump do? He calls him up and congratulates him. To me, that event did not receive sufficient media attention and stands as the defining event of the 100 days of this would-be Mussolini, who is actually such a buffoon that he could never be, even a Mussolini who was himself a buffoon. So this clown, attempting to be a dictator, his presidency during the 100 days was defined for me by that call to this would-be dictator in Turkey.
For me, the biggest take that I have from the 100 days has been, one, I'm glad that he has been ineffective and he has discovered the courts and the fact that they will block you if you do something illegal. He was very surprised about this whole democratic process of just courts. Like, I was glad. The other part is I'm glad that they haven't made him into this like somewhat good guy. Like I'm glad that he has just that he cannot be controlled by smarter people than him, and he has just said whatever he wants. Twitter still, I'm glad that everyone can see what he truly is, and he hasn't been able to hide it like many other presidents do in other countries, like all those other, you're talking about the soon-to-be dictator of Turkey, Erdogan. He has always been very good at, oh, you're scared of terrorism, and that's how he got so much power. Trump hasn't done that. Trump hasn't been able to figure out how to just say the right words over and over and over. That's what I fear the first 100 days were going to be about. I thought it was going to be him still talking about Mexicans, still talking, and ISIS. I thought that was what it was going to be. We're going to get money, ISIS, Mexicans. Yet somehow he doesn't manage to do it. But it's not a great look still. Like, we still got, as you say, a while to go. But those were his first 100 days.
On that note, I think we should conclude and probably lament that 100 days from now we'll probably take up a similar subject. Thank you.
Thank you.